Alrighty, take it away.
Okay, hi. So now we are concerned with the question on how to start the first programming project, or if you are actually a little bit familiar with programming, how to maybe switch to languages, and especially want to talk about C or C++. So the first thing is to have in mind when you were developing, for example, script languages like Python, you were not concerned with the problem of how to build your software, because a script language simply does not have that. You wrote your quellcode in a file, and then you ask the Python interpreter to run this program, and he will simply do it. With C and C++, this is not so easy, because you wrote the source code, and then you have to do something which is called compiling. And later on, you then can add complexity and all the good stuff that you want out of your program. Now, the thing is, you also used, or probably will use, something that we call an IDE, so a program that helps you develop your program. And you probably heard of many. Something very popular is, for example, PyCharm for Python, or Visual Studio Code from Microsoft, that is also great for Python. And for C and C++, we also have very popular ones. For example, the Qt Creator is very nice. Or from Microsoft, we have the Visual Studio, which is not Visual Studio Code, it's something really bigger. And these IDEs, of course, also offer support in building your project. And this is what you want to use later on in bigger projects. You don't want to self-concerned with all the stuff on how to build your project, but you actually should learn that once and have a grasp of what is going on in the background, because this is important when you run into issues and suddenly the compiler is complaining to you and you have no clue what a compiler even is. So this is a bad idea. So therefore, getting introduced in the so-called toolchain is a very good idea. And on top of that, for bigger projects, we have something, for example, which is called Cmake. So with Cmake, we have something where we start. And now, what Cmake does is the following. You can configure in Cmake your project. So you have like your project properties. With C and C++, you want to give like the version. For example, with C++, you want to use, for example, C++ 11 or C++ 20. And all this stuff is then defined in the properties of your project. What you then also will add to your Cmake generator is where it is looking for the source code that you have programmed. So this is another thing that you give it. You will tell them where are the sources, and it will gather them. And together with the sources, it also will gather the includes. When we work with C and C++, we tend to easily need libraries that have things programmed for us that we can then use, so we don't have to implement them ourselves. This is a very common scheme in the world of programming, but like we figured out right now, C and C++ makes that a little bit more complicated, so here as well. And Cmake also will help us. It will, if we tell him what libraries we want to use, it will gather them for us, so it will gather these includes. And from this, we then finally get something that we call a makefile. Now, this makefile can then be handed over to the compiler. And in the makefile concludes all the results that the Cmake run gathered for us. So how our project is set up, what sources the compiler needs to compile, where all the header files are of the libraries that we want to include. And then we take this makefile and we give it to the compiler. So we have the compiler, and we take this and hand it over into this. Now the compiler will then work in several steps. This is not a complete list, but it goes something along those lines of creating so-called object files. This is an in-between step, and from these object files they get handed to the so-called linker. This is an N, sure. The linker will then incorporate the libraries that we used into the source code, and it will manage all the addresses where the pointers of the function calls have to point to. This is all concerned with the linker. And what we then get with maybe another more not too interesting steps after that, we will get something which is our executable. And now we have something that we can actually execute and test. And now you saw the simple task of building your project can be actually very complex, as we can see in this flowchart. And this is something that you should take a little look into how this works. And then you can simply ask your IDE to help you with managing your Cmake file. And when the Cmake is like successfully doing its job, then the compiler has a very easy time to work on your project and to compile it. So therefore, when you get help in the Cmake part, then most likely the compiler will do just what you want it to do.